Their careers were beautifully connected. Along with James Taylor, she sang those iconic backup vocals on Heart of Gold and Old Man. Ronstadt remembered the session fondly, saying, "We sang all night long and never got bored. I love Neil's music." She opened for him on his 1973 tour. While she admitted playing huge arenas was hell for a club act, she also said, "I would stay every single night to hear his show. I learned so much from that." That's the sound of a fan, not a rival. They continued to collaborate for decades. She covered his songs, and he played on hers. So where did this story come from? It might be a wild twisting of one tiny comment. In his autobiography, Young mentions that Ronstadt once warned her friend Nicolette Larson not to get involved with him because he doesn't live in the real world. That's hardly a declaration of war. It sounds like a friend giving honest advice about a famously intense artist. The Feud is a complete fiction that ignores a long and beautiful musical friendship. The alleged feud with Paul Simon is presented as a studio battle of wills. The viral story says they tried to record a duet, but it collapsed because of Simon's controlling nature. He supposedly criticized her vocals and rewrote lyrics until a frustrated Ronstadt walked out, vowing never to work with the dictatorial Simon again. This story is believable because it leans on Simon's reputation as a demanding perfectionist. It's also completely wrong. There was no abandoned duet. Instead, their collaboration was a massive success. Linda provided breathtaking harmony vocals on the song Under African Skies from Simon's 1986 masterpiece, Graceland. And far from being dismissed, her contribution was celebrated. Simon even wrote a line in the song specifically for her. "I said, 'Take this child, Lord, from Tucson, Arizona. Give her the wings to fly through harmony.'" That's a tribute, not an insult. Their work together is a highlight on one of the greatest albums ever made. The myth of a dictatorial Simon crushing their duet is a complete invention, created simply to add another famous name to a fake list. The truth is the exact opposite. Their collaboration was a triumph. This story is the nastiest of the bunch. It claims that at a party in 1968, a drunk Jim Morrison made an aggressive, unwanted advance on Ronstadt, grabbing her in front of a crowd. The incident supposedly left her disgusted, and Morrison later mocked her in interviews as sweet but soulless. This story positions Ronstadt as a victim of the rock scene's toxic, self-destructive side, with Morrison as the chaotic poster boy. It's a powerful image. Now, this tale has become a piece of rock and roll folklore, repeated so often in books and on YouTube that many accept it as fact. But what does Linda herself say about it? In her memoir, she mentions a brief, non-physical encounter with a drunk Morrison, but nothing close to the dramatic assault the myth describes. The legend plays right into Morrison's Lizard King persona, which is why it's so easy to believe. But the real story isn't about her being a victim. It's about her strength. She has written about how she deliberately steered clear of the drug-fueled chaos that consumed people like Morrison. She was focused on her craft, her voice, and her health. The real story isn't a single humiliating encounter. It's a career-long choice to rise above the madness. The myth of a clash with Jim Morrison misses the point entirely. Linda Ronstadt's power was in her refusal to become a character in that kind of tragedy. The final name on the list sets up a clash between 70s rock royalty and the snarling new wave. The story goes that at a 1979 festival, Elvis Costello insulted headliner Linda Ronstadt by calling her music background music for brunch. When she confronted him backstage, he was supposedly arrogant and dismissive, cementing her view of him as a cruel cynic. This perfectly captures the stylistic friction of the era. And while that friction was real, the story of a personal feud is once again a huge exaggeration. The truth is rooted in Ronstadt's cover of Costello's song, Allison. In 1978, she recorded a beautiful, polished version of it. The album sold millions, and the royalties from her cover gave the still struggling Costello a massive and much-needed financial boost. Did Costello make some snarky comments about her version? Absolutely. He famously quipped that he was just happy to get the money. But that was his punk-era persona. He was dismissive of the entire mainstream music industry she represented, not just her. There's no record of that festival insult or backstage fight. In fact, Ronstadt publicly called him the writer of the best new stuff around and told him through the press, "Send me some more songs, just keep thinking about the money." And he did. She recorded 3 more of his songs for her next album, Mad Love, which was her own dive into a new wave sound. This wasn't a feud. It was a fascinating musical dialogue between 2 artists from different worlds who found a surprising and mutually beneficial connection. So the internet is filled with drama, but the truth is often much more interesting. Which of these real stories surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoy separating music history fact from fiction, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more. After looking at all 7 of these feuds, it's obvious that the viral story of Linda Ronstadt's hate list is a complete myth. It's fiction, built from rumors and lies, packaged perfectly for the internet age because it provides drama and confirms our biases about famous people. But it does a huge disservice to Linda Ronstadt. Her legacy isn't about who she hated. It's about the music she loved and the incredible dignity she carried herself with. Her memoir isn't a juicy tell-all. It's a book about the craft of singing and the joy of finding the perfect song. It is deliberately free of bitterness. The real story of Linda Ronstadt is one of quiet, unbreakable strength. In an industry drowning in male egos, she became a superstar through pure talent and professionalism. She didn't get into public fights or tabloid drama. Her power was in her silence, her choice to walk away from anything beneath her, and most of all, in that voice. A voice that could say more in one note than an insult ever could. She didn't survive by fighting fire with fire. She survived by being better, working harder, and holding on to her integrity when everyone around her was losing theirs. The myth of the 7 hated musicians is a tempting story, but the truth of Linda Ronstadt's grace and resilience is a far more powerful legacy. Let's set a scene. It's Los Angeles, 1979. The legendary troubadour is humming with energy. Guitars are being tuned, glasses are clinking, and rock and roll royalty is wandering the halls. But suddenly the buzz dies. An assistant runs into the promoter's office, panicked. "She's gone," he says. Linda just walked out. There was no big fight, no dramatic scene. Linda Ronstadt simply saw a name on the list of performers that night, and without a word, she left. For decades, that story fueled a mystery. Linda Ronstadt, the picture of grace and professionalism, never spoke ill of her peers. She let that incredible voice do all the talking. But her silence didn't mean there weren't battles. It just meant she was picking her moments. Right now, the internet is buzzing with videos and articles claiming that a 78-year-old Linda Ronstadt has finally dropped a bombshell, a list of the 7 musicians she secretly couldn't stand. They promise explosive stories of betrayal and disrespect that defined her career. But is any of it true? Before we dive into the names, let's get one thing straight. Linda Ronstadt has never, ever published a hate list. Not in an interview, not in a memoir, not anywhere. In her own book, Simple Dreams, a musical memoir, she's incredibly gracious, focusing on the music and the craft, not settling old scores. It would be completely out of character. She once said, "There was an unyielding attitude that came with the music that involved being confrontational, dismissive, and aggressive, or, as my mother would say, ungracious. I didn't wear the attitude well." So the idea of her publishing a hit list just doesn't add up. So where are these stories coming from? They're a Frankenstein's monster of gossip, misinterpreted anecdotes, and straight-up fiction stitched together for clicks. Many of the videos even have disclaimers admitting the content is based on speculation and rumors. Our job is to take the 7 names from that viral sensational list and find out what really happened. We're going to peel back the layers of myth to find the truth about her relationships with these artists. Because the real story isn't about hate. It's about a woman of immense talent and integrity navigating the ego-filled, treacherous waters of 1970s rock and roll. And honestly, the truth is way more interesting than the fiction. So let's start with the name that's always at the top of this mythical list. The man who was her drummer, her lover, and the co-founder of one of the biggest bands in history. The viral story is a soap opera. It claims Don Henley, plucked from obscurity by Ronstadt, used her as a stepping stone and then tossed her aside once the Eagles took off. The myth even includes a dramatic backstage scene where he supposedly told her to stick to covers and let real songwriters handle the rest. This insult, they say, led Ronstadt to create a Henley rule, banning his name and music from her life. It's a great story of heartbreak and revenge, but the truth is a lot less dramatic and a lot more professional. Back in 1971, Linda and her manager were putting together a touring band. She hired a drummer from Texas named Don Henley and a guitarist from Detroit named Glenn Frey. They, along with Randy Meisner and Bernie Leadon, became her backing band. Ronstadt herself knew their chemistry was special from day one. She wanted a great harmony band, and that's exactly what they were. It was on that tour that Frey and Henley decided to form their own group. And when they told Linda, she wasn't betrayed. She was supportive. She knew they were destined for something big and even remembers them working out the harmonies for Witchy Woman in her living room. There was no big blow-up. It was just the natural, sometimes painful way bands evolve. The Eagles were born from her band, a fact she has always talked about with pride, not bitterness. Yes, she and Henley were a couple for a while, but their breakup seems to have been just another part of life in Laurel Canyon, not some career-defining betrayal. So where does the arrogant story come from? Probably from later stories about the Eagles' intense, sometimes ruthless, perfectionism. It's possible a distance grew as their fame exploded. But there's no credible source for that backstage insult or a Henley rule. In fact, she did the opposite of banning his music. She recorded what many consider the definitive version of the Henley Frey classic, Desperado. That's a performance of deep empathy, not the work of a woman holding a grudge. Next on the list is a supposed clash of titans, the experimental weirdo versus the Queen of California rock. The story claims that in 1974, a collaboration between Linda Ronstadt and Frank Zappa ended in disaster. Zappa, frustrated with her polished style, supposedly stopped a rehearsal and announced, "This is what happens when you hand real music to a pop singer," leaving Ronstadt humiliated. It's a powerful story that perfectly captures the divide between art and commerce. It's been repeated so much on TikTok and YouTube that it feels like fact. The only problem? There's no real evidence it ever happened. Their only documented work together was years earlier, in the late 60s. Zappa was hired to produce a jingle for Remington electric shavers, and he hired a young Linda Ronstadt to sing on the demo. They both got paid, the ad agency rejected the jingle, and that was that. There's no record of a major failed collaboration in 1974 in either Zappa's or Ronstadt's archives. So why does the myth stick around? Because it plays into what we think we know about them. Zappa was the uncompromising anti-commercial genius. Ronstadt was the superstar with the golden voice who sold millions of records. The fabricated story casts them perfectly in these roles, complete with a cutting insult that sounds exactly like something Zappa would say. The myth claims she privately called him brilliant but brutal. It sounds plausible, but without a source, it's just part of the legend. The truth is, their musical worlds were just too far apart for a serious collaboration to even be likely. The tale of humiliation is a fiction created to dramatize a cultural divide that was real, but much less personal. This one is framed as the ultimate betrayal from a close friend. The myth claims that as David Crosby's life spiraled in the late 70s, he turned on Ronstadt. The breaking point was supposedly a 1978 recording session, where he met her request for a key change with a dismissive "you should learn to adapt." The fight allegedly spilled into a Rolling Stone interview where Crosby called her manufactured, a product, not an artist. That insult, they say, was the last straw. This story fits right into the tragic narrative of Crosby's downfall. But, again, finding any factual proof of this specific feud is next to impossible. Ronstadt and Crosby were definitely key players in the Laurel Canyon scene. But her memoir, Simple Dreams, has no account of a big fight with him. She talks about the sexism of the era, quoting singer Judy Henske, who told her, "In this town there are 4 sexes: men, women, homosexuals, and girl singers." She details the pressures she faced, but never ties them to a personal betrayal by Crosby and that manufactured quote from Rolling Stone. It's the centerpiece of the myth, yet it appears to be a ghost. No one can seem to find it. The story feels true because Crosby's struggles in that era are well documented. He did alienate many friends. This myth just hijacks that reality and invents a specific conflict with Ronstadt. It's a story that gets repeated endlessly online, but repetition doesn't make it true. By all credible accounts, this dramatic feud just didn't happen the way the internet says it did. The story here is one of betrayed ideals. The myth claims that Neil Young wounded Linda Ronstadt twice. First, by dismissing her ideas for a 1976 benefit concert, and second, by publicly calling her a hollow commercial artist. This supposedly led Ronstadt to vow never to share a stage with him again, privately calling him loud in message, cruel in execution. This tale pits 2 beloved icons against each other, but their actual history isn't one of conflict, but of deep, mutual respect.